Hello and welcome to the Greek version of Acts 8:34 through 40. And so let's get started. The context, as I said in the podcast, is God has sent Philip to the Ethiopian eunuch in Gaza, and the Ethiopian eunuch is reading the prophet Isaiah. He's reading in Isaiah 53, but he doesn't know who Isaiah is talking about. And I talk about in the podcast how this is natural, given the flow of Isaiah 50 in that section of Isaiah 40 through 66. And so verse 33 ends with Philip asking the Ethiopian eunuch, do you understand what you're reading? And so then we come to verse 34. And the eunuch answering said to Philip, okay, this is an aorist passive participle. A lot of times an aorist participle means prior time to the main verb. So you would say aorist had, after he had asked, he said. But this is not that kind of situation. This is typical with the word answering. In fact, you just kind of get used to, when you've read enough of the Gospels, you just kind of understand that this means something like, and answering, he said. It's what we might call a modal participle, because it's telling the mode in which he speaks. He's speaking in an answering kind of way. And so it's not a temporal participle. So we don't have the aping and aorist passive with a theta epsilon, aorist had. We don't do this with this because it isn't an adverbial participle, so it's telling us about the verb, but it's not telling us the timing of the verb. It's not a temporal participle. It's a modal participle. So therefore it has the same time as the main verb in this particular case, sorry. Okay, so, and the eunuch answered Philip and said, and we decided yesterday that this is in fact nominative, quote, capital delta, I ask you, concerning whom is the prophet saying this? Concerning himself or concerning someone different? Notice we have the same form tenos, very interesting here, but with the accent on the first syllable, it's an interrogative pronoun. Concerning whom, question mark, but here the accent's on the second syllable, and it's the indefinite pronoun. Someone, concerning someone different. Fun, good. It has a certain, it almost is chiasmic. I don't think it's quite chiasmic, A, B, B, A, but we do have an A, B, but there's no, it doesn't, anyway, it's interesting. But we have tenos on both ends. Inclusio, not really. Okay, verse 35. And having opened his mouth, so this is an aorist participle. C is the key to hidden sigma, sigma alpha. Philip, having opened his mouth and having begun from the scripture this, again, hidden sigma, C is the key, sigma alpha, aorist. So it's an aorist participle. Archomai, archo means rule in the active and begin in the middle. So this is a middle, aorist middle participle. A real middle. It's not deponent. It's really middle. He preached to him the good news of Jesus. He preached to him Jesus, the good news. Preached the good news, euangelizomai. Aorist, because of the sigma alpha, middle, deponent. Omai is deponent. Okay, verse 36. And as they were going, imperfect, along the way, they came upon some water. Aorist of Urkomai. And the eunuch says, look, behold, water. What, interrogative pronoun, prevents me to be baptized? Nada, zilch, nothing. Okay, now as I said in the podcast, in a modern version, you go straight to verse 38, and you think, whoa, wait a minute, 36? What, 38? What happened to the Greek? And I may talk about this a little bit in tomorrow's Patrons Only podcast, but basically, the sentiment of most scholars is that some early copier of Acts felt like there needed to be some sort of profession of faith before Philip was baptized. And so one was provided. And I'll talk about the text of Acts tomorrow. The text of Acts, in particular in the New Testament, has some wild stuff. That's tomorrow. Okay, and Philip said, if you believe from your whole heart, it is lawful. And answering, he said, another version of that, I believe the Son of God to be the Jesus Christ. I believe Jesus Christ to be the Son of God. Or you could say, I believe the Son of God is Jesus Christ. I'm not sure how you would grammatically determine which to put first other than the order. Most versions say, I believe Jesus is the Christ, is the Son of God. Okay, so nothing wrong with this. I talk about in the podcast a little bit about it. No problem with this theologically. It's just not in the oldest manuscripts of Acts. And so we'll talk about the process by which textual criticism works maybe tomorrow on the podcast for patrons. Become a patron. It's only $5 a month. Okay, you can give more as well. If you want to give $1,000 a month, great. If you want to give me even more than that, I'll quit my day job. Yeah, probably not. I just won't do as much. Okay, verse 38. And he commanded the chariot to stand. Aorist infinitive of histemi. Aorist indicative there. And both, amphoteroi, both descended, this is the aorist of katabaino, into the water, both the Philip and the eunuch. Okay, so we're going down into water. That suggests probably either pouring or immersion. I talked a little bit about that in the video podcast. And he baptized him. Okay, so you could picture him pouring water on his head or dunking him. Probably he dunks him, but notice that it's not a big deal here. Description is not prescription, as I said in the video. The Bible never commands immersion. It does imply that baptism itself is normative. Anyway, I know some people say, well, the very word baptize means to immerse, but I think that's not easy to prove, especially when you look at Mark 7, where they wash. I mean, most translations translate baptizo there as wash cups. And of course, in the Didache, there are options. So it doesn't seem like how you did it was a big issue in the early church. That they did it seemed to be significant. It was normative. But how you did it was not a debate the early church had. It's a modern kind of debate. And frankly, I don't really understand why people get so bent out of shape over those issues. But I like immersion. That's my preferred way. But anyway, okay, verse 39. And when he came up from the water, that sounds like immersion, although it could mean he's coming out of the river or out of a lake or out of a pond. But let's go with immersion. Why not? This is the aorist of anabino. So we have katabaino to go down, and we have anabino to come up. And it's aorist because of the bay. The ino is gone from the water. The Spirit of the Lord seized Philip, harpazo. The sigma epsilon is aorist, third singular. An alpha has been augmented. And he did not see him any longer. That is, the eunuch did not see Philip any longer. This is the aorist of horao, to see. For he was going on his way rejoicing. That is, I assume, the eunuch. Philip's probably rejoicing too. But in this particular case, the eunuch has even more to rejoice about. Of course, that's just my interpretation. I think it's the eunuch that keeps going. This is the imperfect of peruamai. Verse 40, and Philip was found, aorist passive, in Azotus to the north, Ashdod, along the coast. And having gone along, participle, deponent, present, he was preaching the good news, imperfect, to all the cities until he came to Caesarea. Here's another infinitive game, a temporal one of sorts. Until heos to elthane, infinitive. This is an aorist infinitive because the elth, aorist because the elth, infinitive because the ain. Okay, this has been some Greek, and we've made it through yet another chapter of the book of Acts, Acts chapter 8.